I would now like to very simply welcome the Bishop, say, Bishop, you are indeed welcome here, and we know that the way you talk about us as system leaders as your collaborators, we thank you for that. We thank you for your leadership, and we thank you for your passion for the work that we do. Bishop Anthony.
Thank you, Greg. I heard that some of you are struggling to put your ties back on after the summer. There's a solution to that: get a Dominican habit. I grew out of ties about half my life ago, and I'm pleased not to have had to put one back on. It's great to be with you, my chief collaborators, in the task of bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to the young people of Western Sydney. Easter comes early this year, and so Lent is almost upon us. Lent words are re-words: repent, return, recover, repair, renew. All are called to repentance, not just the great sinners, because all are affected when any member is sinful or suffering. The body of Christ is wounded. Yet for all the bruised purple of Lent, it's a season of hope. It ends not with the death of God's Son on the cross, but with his rising from the dead for our salvation. It's against that backdrop of death and resurrection, sorrow and joy, that the Catholic bishops of New South Wales will soon issue a pastoral letter on the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse and the matters that have led to it. The terms of reference for that commission recognise that children deserve a safe and happy childhood, and that institutions such as the Church and its schools can help that to happen. But children have sometimes been violated in those very situations, and leaders have sometimes failed to respond appropriately. We mustn't put our heads in the sand about any of this, or try to minimise or explain it away. Only last week, the Whitlam report into the F case was released. Our hearts go out to all victims of child sexual abuse, but in this case it's especially so as we know that at least one of F's victims was in our diocese. There have been other arrests and allegations in recent times. Even if many of these refer to historic cases, and even if we've improved the way we respond to these things, the damage has been done. And there's a lingering public perception that the Church has not addressed this issue adequately. This has in turn damaged the credibility and mission of the Church in education as elsewhere. So before I launch into the principal topics I want to raise with you this year, let me highlight a few points to be made in the forthcoming pastoral letter that we might keep in mind as the Royal Commission progresses. First, these terrible sins have done great damage to the victims and their families. Here the bishops will repeat and make their own Pope Benedict XVI's apology made during World Youth Day in Sydney. He acknowledged the shame which we have all felt as a result of the sexual abuse of minors by some clergy and religious in this country. He said he was deeply sorry for the pain and suffering the victims have endured. These misdeeds, which constitute so grave a betrayal of trust, he said, deserve unequivocal condemnation. The Pope urged us to work together to combat this evil and to ensure that victims receive compassion and care, perpetrators are brought to justice, and all young people enjoy a safe relationship. Secondly, child abuse is not the whole story of the Church. Far from it. The Catholic Church has long played an important role in our society. Holy priests and religious have worked tirelessly for the glory of God and the good of their people. Vast numbers of people benefit from the Church's activity in education, to which each of you contributes so generously. They also gain from the Church's works in parish life, welfare, healthcare, ministry to young people and migrants, aged care, service to the poor and marginalised. There's deep faith and compassion amongst our pastors and people. We shouldn't lose sight of this amidst the current consciousness of failure. Thirdly, the current crisis is an opportunity for purification of the Church. With the help of the Royal Commission report, we will try to get to the bottom of the causes both of abuse and of failures to respond to it appropriately. We know we must re-examine our attitude to children and vulnerable people and how we can keep them safe. The ways we attract, discern and form vocations to the priesthood, religious life and teaching. How we appraise, develop, supervise and support those in ministry. Ways to identify and best respond to any hint of misconduct. How we bring justice and healing to victims. Ways to work best with civil authorities. Further concrete measures will emerge in the months ahead. As well as these structural measures, we need to consider spiritual ones. Lent is for doing something to realign our hearts and minds on God's. Tears of shame and sorrow must be the beginnings of spiritual renewal for the Church. So the bishops will be calling for prayer for the success of the Royal Commission, justice and healing for victims, for wisdom and compassion for leaders and carers, for repentance by perpetrators, for grace for those tempted to lose faith or hope, for safety for all young people, and for consolation for all affected. Our society has only begun to appreciate the scale and seriousness of abuse of children and young people, not only in churches, schools and other institutions, but in families and in the wider community. This means our young people, more than ever, need your passion and professionalism, your determination to keep them safe, and to proclaim the preciousness of every young person. We need you to persevere in these challenging times, for God's sake, for the Church's sake, for the sake of our children. I thank you for doing so. Over the summer, we were treated to 3 very Catholic films that will frame my 3 topics today. The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, has already grossed over $921 million at the box office. It's the first of 3 projected films by Peter Jackson, prequels to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. All based on novels by the great Catholic author J.R.R. Tolkien, who was also one of the translators of the Jerusalem Bible and so of our lectionary. Most of you will know the general outlines of The Hobbit. The wizard Gandalf tricks the hobbit Bilbo into joining a band of dwarves seeking to reclaim treasure stolen from them by an evil dragon. Through many brave deeds in the face of hideous monsters, Bilbo matures, learning what really matters, what battles are worth fighting. But his companion's development remains arrested. And so when the dragon is ultimately defeated, lust for gold divides them. Our Hobbit, however, is satisfied with only a small portion of the treasure, having no need for more. He returns home to the Shire so his nephew Frodo can begin a new adventure. Much has been written about the meaning of Tolkien's stories. They're obviously about loyalty, courage, and character. There's much about leadership, temptations, and ideals. As a bishop at this time in history, I take great comfort from what is said about the trials and responsibilities of a ring bearer. In Tolkien's agricultural ideal, people can be happy with their lot without amassing great wealth by conquest or industry. As the dwarf king dies, as he will in the third Hobbit film, he says to Bilbo, "There's more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world." Tolkien's generation of English authors were deeply traditional in their Christian faith, morals and worship, but quite radical in their critique of Western capitalism. He thus explored Catholic social justice themes through his stories. For many people today, religion no longer plays the prominent role in their imagination and action that it did for writers such as Tolkien, Lewis, Chesterton and Green. Many Australians now put no religion on the census. Of the 61% who still call themselves Christian, many don't really know much about it, have low levels of subjective faith, and live by a mix of fragmentary religious traditions, consumerism, and moral relativism. In 2005, the US National Study of Youth and Religion, headed up by sociologist Christian Smith, published Soul Searching: The Religious and Spiritual Lives of American Teenagers. It identified what it called moralistic therapeutic deism as the fastest growing religion amongst the young. Its key doctrines are that there is a God who created and orders the world and watches over human beings. That this God wants people to be nice to each other, as taught by the Bible and most world religions. That being nice makes you happy, that is, makes you feel good about yourself, and makes the world a happier place, which is the purpose of life. That you don't have to involve God in all this too much, except when you've got problems. And that whatever particular things people do in their lives, good people, which is most people, go to heaven when they die. A strange thing about this religion is that no one knows they're a member. Yet it has numbers that would make most gyms jealous. This morning, I'd like to focus on the moralistic aspect of this spirituality. Its reduction of faith to behaviour. I think this happens in 3 steps. The first is reducing faith to morality. The thought is As long as I say and do the right things, I'm an okay Catholic. But our faith is foremost about a personal relationship with Christ and his saints, and thus about so much more than commandments, important as these are. It's about relationship and worship, liturgy and sacraments, beatitudes and prayer, and more. It must not become empty formulas and do-gooding. Having reduced faith to morality, bad step number 2 is reducing morality to one department of morality, such as sexual morality or social justice morality. I often hear Catholic schools and agencies talk about their passion for social justice, but dislocated not just from the rest of morality, but also from the life of faith and worship. I applaud recent efforts to engage students in works with the spiritually poor through CCD classes, and with the physically poor through Young Vinnies, and to provide immersion experiences alongside the poor. But as the Australian Bishop's recent document, Living the Truth in Love, points out, Catholic social teaching is only one dimension of Catholic morality. There are also the ethics of business, of respect for life, scientific research, healthcare, sex and the family, communication, education, ecology, religion, and so forth. These other areas of morality, like the other areas of faith, are as important as social justice for a Christian. Indeed, Catholic social teaching can only be fully understood and achieved when integrated with these other dimensions of life. Now, there are many reasons why people might reduce faith to morals and morals to social justice. Some teachers are less than confident or sympathetic with other areas of Catholic teaching, such as sexual morality. They find social justice less demanding to talk about and easier to get young people interested in. It can be turned into a project, such as a fundraiser, and doesn't have to be too overtly religious. We can crow a bit about the result, but without the goal of encounter with Christ, conversion of life, passion for Catholic truth and worship, it's unclear what makes such projects Catholic. This sells our mission, and therefore our students, short. A third stage in the moralisation of Christianity is reducing social justice to its less demanding requirements. We can, for instance, wag our fingers at governments, international agencies, the Vatican, the rich, big business, but what about ourselves? What does Catholic social teaching say to me? Does it challenge me to change, or have I domesticated it as a feel-good project? Am I like a dwarf lusting after gold, or a hobbit satisfied with what I really need? Catholic social teaching must be allowed to interrogate my character, relationships, and activities. Some people fear that the new evangelisation means proselytising rather than building a better world. But the Church teaches that social justice is an integral part of evangelisation, a constitutive dimension of preaching the gospel and an essential part of the Church's mission. The new evangelisation, which the modern world urgently needs, Pope John Paul II explained, must include among its essential elements a proclamation of the Church's social doctrine, in word and deed. In his social encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, Pope Benedict XVI taught that only in truth does charity shine forth. Only in truth can charity be authentically lived. So the Church is willing to collaborate with others, even those who don't share her faith, but share her ideals for the human person. But we must be wary of charitable activities driven by agendas inimical to the truths of religion. Our justice, service and charitable giving must be lived homilies where people may encounter Christ, hear his words, see them in action. When a man is ordained a deacon, the bishop hands him the gospel, saying, "Receive the gospel of Christ, whose herald you now are. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, and practice what you teach." Those are exactly the words you might say to a teacher or a principal beginning their life in the Catholic system. Receive the gospel of Christ, whose heralds you now are. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, and practice what you teach. In other words, be authentic. Be the real deal. If you are part of the mission of the Church, tell its story in all you do. If you believe the gospel of Christ, live it, not thinned down but full cream, in social justice and elsewhere. I call on school communities to reflect deeply on the principles of Catholic social teaching, such as authentic human progress, subsidiarity and the common good, and enact them conscientiously. An excellent resource for that purpose is the Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church, published by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace in 2004. More recently, I recommend William Newton's very accessible A Civilization of Love, the Catholic Vision for Human Society. Social justice projects are a great way to stir the faith of young people, so long as charitable works and fundraising are integrated with prayer, reflection, and formative experiences that bring them closer to Jesus, the source of charity. Today I'm launching a resource called Love One Another, as I have loved you, that I hope will assist you in choosing social justice activities and charities worthy of our efforts. I encourage schools to collaborate with parishes and diocesan agencies on fundraising initiatives and to seek advice from their parish priests and agency leaders about which charities to support and how. Catholic Care Social Services, for instance, is the agency of our diocese that sponsors projects such as supporting mothers-to-be, people with disabilities, families in crisis, Indigenous people and the homeless through accommodation and other services. projects that always need more resources. I know how generous your school communities are, and so I know how much you can help in the Church's social mission to Western Sydney. So now, rather than going on to part 2 of my talk, I'd like to stop for a little while and invite you to reflect on and talk with each other for a few minutes on the question of how can a fundraising opportunity in a school become a formation opportunity for its students. How can a fundraising opportunity in a school become a formation opportunity for the students? Might talk about that for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll hear from you and take your questions for 5 or 10 minutes after that. Any comments back to me or questions?
Good morning, Bishop.
Hi.
Thank you for your words. They're very inspiring. One of the things that we spoke about on our table is that with the social justice group that so many schools have, often we have a 30-minute, 40-minute lunch, and by the time all the kids get there and settle down and all that sort of thing, we really only have about 30 minutes or 25 minutes to talk about things, to present things, to get the kids' opinions, and often it's difficult to have the time, I guess, to really delve into the issues and the formation that you would like the students to have. Last year, it's something that I definitely recognised, or we recognised actually even as a group, that we were raising this money, and it was more like, well, okay, what's next? Christmas is coming up, what are we going to do? We have to support Vinnies and things like that. So one of the challenges for us that we definitely have to take on is how do we find or use the time that we have effectively to bring about this formation of the students in social justice and Catholic teaching. So just your comments in regards to that.
Thank you. I think clearly a group of enthusiasts who get half an hour's go at this, that's great. That's better than zero time or 15 minutes time. It's at least twice as better as 15 minutes. But there's real risks. Firstly, that they are seen as the kind of such peace and justice nicks, the kind of the radical red members of the school community who care about the world, and the rest of us can say we've ticked that box because there's a social justice group. We can merrily go along unconcerned about those things. Clearly, that's not enough. It's great for them, but we've got to find ways in RE and in other places to make sure these issues are put before everybody. I think one place is when we celebrate things like that we've collected this for the Caritas appeal following the tsunami. We've gone and had our big collection, and then we have a big assembly where we all celebrate that. Well, what do we celebrate? A big cheque and handing it over? Or do we talk about, well, what has the tsunami done to these people's lives? And do we know anyone? Has one of the kids at a school been through a natural disaster and can talk about it? And where is God? How do we make sense of that? Where is God letting those things happen? And where is the Christian community in response? We can turn these into opportunities to reflect and to connect with the rest of our faith and life, rather than being a box we've ticked by doing it for half an hour a week in those weeks that we can find the space in term. I think probably there's lots of other ways that we could think of the connections that in other subjects, not just in RE, that when in history we contemplate the effects of wars or natural disasters or whatever that have led to major effects in history, when we sent convicts in their thousands to Australia and then migrants in their thousands and refugees, and the impacts of that on Aborigines and others. There's so many social justice issues in there. You don't have to just treat this as a matter of historical interest and let's record the fact. That there are, I think, many places we can make the connections and therefore expand our time of reflection on these issues beyond the 30 minutes, which, as you point out, just isn't enough.
Good morning, Bishop. The Mini Guineas program in the primary schools is a really worthwhile program. It actually has a faith component that we work with the children, and I think it's a very worthwhile program for our senior primary children to be involved in.
Hear, hear. I think there are some groups like Vinnie's that have thought about this very question, about how you make it more than just a fundraiser. We need the funds, so you want efficient fundraising when there's good causes, but they've reflected on how we connect that with faith and life.
Good morning, Bishop Anthony. We were reflecting at our table about a whole school approach, and there's a consistent whole school approach, such as finding God in all things and men and women for others, that they don't become necessarily isolated events, they become integral into the way in which the school operates. One of the things that we also spoke about was the value of an organisation in the school that encourages people to have faith in action or to become contemplatives in action, such as YCS, which is with its approach to see, just and act, yep. And also with its prevention. And we were wondering that when that approach is taken, that the notion of the reductionist model doesn't occur. In fact, it becomes an integral part of the vision of the school. And certainly celebration and prayer become intertwined into the action of social justice.
Yep. I think groups, again, we mentioned the Young Vinnies, YCS and after school YCW have clearly for 50 years been thinking through this sort of question of how you put these very important passions and concerns in the context of the big picture of the Christian vision for the world and growth in holiness. And if we've got programs, approaches that will help to make sure that happens, whatever good work we're doing, like raising funds for this or that, then that has to be better, because it's actually changing the young people and perhaps the young teachers too, not just achieving some target for funds. At my table, it was mentioned that some schools get so sick of all these fundraisers that they decide to just have a levy and levy everybody, and that'll be our contribution to charity for this year. Well, that seems to me the purest form of turning this into an entirely utilitarian venture to get the money without reflecting on, is this bringing any change of heart, any expansion of imagination and of vision, any connection with faith and life for the young people. And I'd really think there'd be better ways of doing it, such as you've mentioned. One more. Sorry.
Thank you, Bishop, for your talk this morning. I've enjoyed it very much, and I admire your passion. I was reading in one of the documents, Bishop, that some of the money raised at the school level should be directed to World Youth Day. Could you please share your views as to why that should be the case?
I'm not sure what document that is or what it's saying. I would think whenever we're fundraising, we should be absolutely clear with donors about where it's going. So if they think they're collecting for a social justice project, that's where it's going, and it doesn't go to promote something else. But certainly this World Youth Day, we are very deliberately and consciously making it a social justice project. So the young people, before they go off to Rio and have that wonderful week with the Pope and with the young people of the world, our young people are going to go first to Lima, Peru, and work with Caritas to build some houses for the very poor, for just about the poorest people they'll ever meet. And I think that will be a very powerful experience for them, and it will do some real good for the people there in Lima. And we're hoping to build, I think, about 8 houses. Maybe it'll be more depending on what we raise first for the building. So there would be an example where the World Youth Day collecting is towards genuinely towards a social justice project. But if it's just I want to get to World Youth Day to jump around with my friends and with the Pope and God, well, maybe I should be collecting that for that in another way. Again, I think World Youth Day is a good example of the integration, where we don't do social justice on this day or over here, and we do God on this day and over here. That we're helping them see the connections, that the passion for these things is every day and is at the heart of our faith. Well, let me come now to part 2 of my talk, and you'll be relieved to know that parts 2 and 3 are rather shorter than part 1. Even more overtly Catholic than The Hobbit is the recent film version of the stage musical of the 1862 novel Les Miserables by the French Catholic writer Victor Hugo. The film has so far won Golden Globe Awards for Best Picture, Best Actor and Best Supporting Actress, and has 8 Academy Award nominations. At the beginning of Les Mis, ex-convict Jean Valjean is freed not just from his chains, but from the cynicism life had taught him. A bishop he had robbed is his archangel, delivering the news by the witness of the martyrs, by the passion and the blood. God has raised you out of darkness. I have bought your soul for God. The film version follows up with Jean Valjean on his knees in the bishop's chapel after receiving absolution. He prays fervently that the high plan to which this angelic bishop has called him might be realised, and concludes that the old Jean Valjean is nothing now. Another story must begin. Like Tolkien's mercy for the ring-bearer, so Les Mis' willingness to see good in a bishop is very welcome. So is the thought that Catholic prayers, sacraments and convents might actually be good for people, that they can give them a new start, hope, vocation. While the world admires the law-abiding, such as Officer Javert, the wealth accumulators, such as the Thénardiers, or the ideologues at the barricades, Les Miserables' heroes demonstrate that redemption is pure gift from God and his saints. With such fullness of grace comes the high plan of the Christian vocation. In a few weeks' time, on the Feast of the Annunciation, we will celebrate the first Christian vocation. A woman sits deep in prayer and contemplation, like Jean Valjean, considering her calling, when the angel of the Lord appears and declares unto her the Hail Mary. After some consternation and explanation, she pronounces herself the handmaid of the Lord and consents to what the angel has said. She conceives of the Holy Spirit, and the Word made flesh comes to dwell amongst us. All of history turns on this instant. Everything is either BC, before that moment, or AD, after it. The moment of the Angelus. The Angelus is an ancient daily prayer of Christians, usually said at noon when the sun is highest in the sky, and sometimes at dawn and dusk, around 6 in the morning and the evening. It consists of 3 Gospel versicles, 3 Hail Marys in response, and a concluding prayer, all in honour of the Incarnation. Bells are customarily rung to encourage people to stop work, if only for a few moments, and reflect upon God's gifts to us. To ask themselves, what is all this busyness for? And how does it serve the enfleshment of God? And to say, yes, please, and thank you. 10 years ago, when I was a very new bishop in Sydney, awaiting a permanent secretary, we hired an excellent temp who knew almost nothing about the Catholic religion, or I suspect any religion, apart from moralistic therapeutic deism. On her first day, I explained that one of her jobs would be to ring the Angelus each day, the parish church. No problem, she said. But later in the day, she came to me to ask, now what's the phone number of this evangelist you want me to ring each day? Angelus Domini nunciavit Mariae. The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary. To pray the Angelus is to stop for a few seconds to join Mary in pondering and affirming the Incarnation, consecrating our day to the service of God and his people. Even those who aren't Catholic can understand that. After I introduced the ringing of the Angelus in my parish, I got many favourable comments. One non-Catholic lady, however, rang up to say it was bothering her dog and wondered why we did it. I explained, and she responded that she thought that was a lovely idea. I don't know what she prayed each day thereafter when she heard the bells. Probably that her dog would stop barking. But she saw the sense in stopping and thinking and thanking. Now we'll be doing it together as a diocese. 43,000 students and 4,500 teachers and staff. Our bishop, clergy and chancery staff will be also. How wonderful that we can be all praying together for a few moments each day. Parramatta Diocese will be a veritable powerhouse of prayer around midday each day. Some of you will know the several paintings of the Annunciation by the Dominican painter and patron saint of artists, Fra Angelico. This one is in the dormitory corridor of the Dominican Priory of San Marco in Florence. Through a window onto a medieval cloister, we look upon one of the most beautiful archangels ever painted. Angelico had the architect make a skylight in the ceiling above the painting so that sunbeams would shine directly on the angel. He then cleverly embellished Gabriel's wings with silica. It has the effect of making the wings seem to flutter, as if the angel has just landed. Gabriel genuflects in homage, saying by his posture what he says by his words, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you." At this stage in its evolution, with only the first half of the Ave Maria as we know it today, people would genuflect, like Gabriel, at the words of thy womb, Jesus. As sunlight floods the scene, it shines upon a virgin larger than life, disproportionately big for the building, unequivocally queen of heaven and earth. Yet she's dressed in this painting not in glorious technicolor, as in most of Fra Angelico's oeuvre, but in the stark black and white of a Dominican habit. She's seated not on a glorious throne, but on a cheap friar's stool. She's a Dominican. Now, this is not just Dominican chauvinism. The point is, she's at home in their home. Great artists invite us into the holy scenes and the scenes into our daily lives. In this case, we wait anxiously, listening, hoping for salvation at last. Eve said no on our behalf. But Eva, in reverse, is Ave. The one whom the angel hails with Ave could begin the reversal of what Eve and Adam wrought. So all creation is hushed and awaits her response. Angels listen. The dead listen. The faithful of Israel listen. The earthly and heavenly spheres listen. What will she say? It's the turning point of all history. I am the handmaid of the Lord, said Mary. Be it done unto me according to thy word. At last, humanity in her says yes to God, and God becomes a human embryo. And so we genuflect or bow like the angel when we come to the words, and the word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. At that moment, the angel asks us also, will you have God do to you as he wills? Will you have God do to you as he wills? Often, I suspect, we say yes. As Mary, the second Eve, said yes. Sometimes we say no, like the first Eve did. Too often we say maybe. Yes, God, I'll let you do what you want with me, as long as it's not too hard, as long as it's not too different from what I want, as long as you give me this or that in exchange. We're not hard-hearted or closed-hearted so much as half-hearted. Rather than running hot and cold, we are lukewarm. That can be in our marriages, family life, other friendships, church life, school life, leadership, teaching. And maybe can be as dangerous as no sometimes. It can be a way of saying no without saying it. A refusal to commit. Like kids who delay RSVPing in case a better offer comes along. But Mary didn't say maybe. Thank God. And by reciting the Angelus, we can say yes with her. So from the beginning of term 2, the 30th of April this year, I ask that the Angelus be prayed in all our schools, preferably at noon. I'll leave the details to the ERE team, the DOSPs, and each school. Some may do it over the PA, some may have students or teachers lead it in the class. In your packets is a formation document entitled The Angelus and some suggestions on implementation. Catechetical materials for students are also on the way. Our great CEO team will follow up with formative and promotional materials. By cultivating such habits of prayer and of interrupting work, if ever so briefly, for the higher things, we are helping ensure that prayer is part of the ordinary rhythm of life for our young people, like brushing their teeth. And then, when the hard times come, as they did for John Valjean and Fontaine, when the puzzle is deep or the need is great, they will know where to go. Which brings me to part 3. Jan Martel's prize-winning novel, Life of Pi, recently made into a $120 million movie by Ang Lee, was a third summer spiritual treat. It's a fantasy adventure about an Indian boy who survives 227 days at sea after a shipwreck, mostly in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger, Richard Parker. In the process, it explores the question of God's existence. President Obama, who read the book with his daughter, declared it an elegant proof of God and the power of storytelling. Whatever we think of the answers in the book, the question of God's existence is irresistible, it seems, even for the most powerful family on earth. Related questions include, are we more than bundles of atoms and energy, flesh and blood? Are we also spiritual beings with the possibility of life after death? Do our lives in the meantime have a purpose? Is there more to our loving, thinking, choosing, our big questions and little answers, than the laws of nature and survival of the fittest? Does God want to say anything to me about these things? If so, how? Would he ever speak so directly to me as to become a human being himself, and so definitively to me as to give me a religion to live by, and so on? Well, in the movie, young Pai Patel explores various religions in search for answers. I suppose he would have been up there with our prize-winning students in the HSC studies of religion, as young Pai joins Hinduism, Christianity and Islam all at the same time. When his teacher in the novel condemns all religion as darkness, Pai thinks to himself, darkness? Darkness is the last thing that religion is. Religion is light. He wonders if the teacher is just testing him, like when the teacher says, no mammal lays eggs, waiting for the boy to respond, platypuses do. When his father, in the film, calls religion darkness, Pai immediately makes the sign of the cross and announces he wants to be baptised. Questioning, Pai concludes, is useful. We must even have our times in the Garden of Gethsemane, like Christ anguished in prayer. But we must move on, he says. To To choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. So young Pi sought catechesis in various places and did a great deal of soul-searching on his own, as there was little sympathy for his religious quest at home or in his state school. Recalling the days of floating lost at sea, Pi says, "It was hard, oh, it was hard. Faith in God is an opening up, a letting go, a deep trust, a free act of love. But sometimes it was so hard to love. Sometimes my heart was sinking so fast with anger, desolation and weariness, I was afraid it would sink to the very bottom of the Pacific." It was hard, until he surrendered to God, like the one on the crucifix who had so disturbed him when he first entered a church. The film concludes by asking us which story is more satisfying. Pi's story with God in it, or the secular world story without. It's a rather postmodern way of framing the question of God's existence and the truths of religion. But as Pi concludes in the novel, God doesn't need to be defended by arguments about his existence. He'll be fine whether we believe in him or not. It's us who need to be shaped by the questions and answers. We need the awe and gratitude, the hope and love that faith opens up to us. It's for that reason that I want to be sure that we are offering our young people the very best we can by way of religious education. Throughout 2013, we will take a long, hard look at RE in our schools. Our present curriculum and supporting materials are now a decade and a half old. So I've asked the CEO to conduct a full review of the programs. They've enlisted the help of the University of Notre Dame, Australia, who will conduct online questionnaires, face-to-face interviews, surveys and data analysis. I expect a final report in February next year, along with some recommendations for action. I've asked Ian Smith to keep in touch with system leaders, my Episcopal Vicar for Education and Formation, and the councils of priests and of deans, about appropriate processes and directions for review at the local level. This review will assist us in evangelising and catechising smarter, better, deeper, so that the encounter with Christ may shape the hearts and the truths of the gospel illuminate the minds of our young people to an even greater degree. This is not just a side project, but a thorough examination of one of the most important things we do. And I pray God will help us get it right. Our students are unlikely to spend 227 days shipwrecked with a tiger. Though there are many things in young people's lives today almost as scary and not half as beautiful as a tiger. What I want to be sure of is that we have equipped them as best we can for whatever life has in store for them after they leave us. And RE is obviously critical. To conclude, the dwarves in The Hobbit were possessed by their possessions, and only the halfling from the west could see that there is more to life than that. Social justice projects and fundraising are all ways of embracing that alternative wisdom that is Catholic social teaching. a wisdom that must be situated within a fuller relationship to Christ and his church and the rest of Catholic teaching. The heroes of Les Miserables come to see the face of God in the love of another person. This wisdom was gained through redemptive suffering, certainly, but also through allowing prayer to break into the grind so that they might hear the words of angels. Pi, adrift in life's boat, survived months of hunger, thirst, and tiger claws because he had been nurtured on a higher wisdom of religion, including contemplating the one on the cross. 3 recent movies, all of which can speak to the present difficulties of the Church in Australia and also to the needs of Catholic education in Parramatta today. We have an exciting year ahead. God bless you.